Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Geoffrey Harpham, Director of the National Humanities Center. I want to welcome you to the keynote address to this conference on human rights and the humanities. This is, as those of you who were last year know, the second of 3 annual conferences on this theme, events that will anchor a multidimensional inquiry into the historical and philosophical and cultural aspects of human rights. Our partners in this undertaking are the Carnegie Corporation, Duke University, North Carolina State University, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and the Research Triangle Foundation, and I want to begin this evening by thanking them for their contribution. We're putting our shoulder to this particular wheel because we feel that we can make a difference. The subject of human rights is so ubiquitous in today's environment that it's very easy to feel persuaded that we actually understand it. What could be more self-evident than the premise that everyone has a right to decent treatment, no matter where they happen to have been born? What can be more comforting than to think that we can gather together all the otherwise unthinkable atrocities of the world and declare them to be in violation of something like a law? So compelling is the concept of human rights that it has become, as one writer has put it, the universal language for making fundamental moral and political claims. We encounter the term every day in the context of stories about trade and labor practices, penal codes, cultural customs, reproductive rights, and environmental issues. People who are alleged to have suffered human rights abuses include residents of Gaza, the victims of honor killings, women prevented from having an abortion, people living near toxic sites, and George Soros, who claimed that his human rights had been violated by a French court that had convicted him of insider trading. In fact, he actually took his case to the European Court of Human Rights, which, however, upheld the judgment. Those accused of perpetrating human rights abuses include tribal councils that sentence women to death by stoning, Royal Dutch Petroleum, and the government of the United States of America. But ubiquity does not mean consensus or even coherence. Hannah Arendt wrote about the perplexities of the rights of man, and these perplexities have only multiplied in the era of human rights. At every level, the concept is conflicted and contested. Virtually no nation that is accused of human rights abuses has conceded the claim. And sometimes even the supposed victim of a human rights abuse will disagree with the supposition. Nor are academics agreed on the relevant history, the fundamental concept, or even the utility of human rights talk. There's a substantial school of thought that holds that a hidden human rights abuse is actually implicit in the very term. Others point out that by invoking a universal norm, the concept of human rights actually undercuts the principles of national self-determination and cultural particularity. And some feel that an emphasis on human rights actually mystifies and confuses the issue by focusing attention on the sufferings of a few people rather than on systemic injustices that affect the many. Well, the premise of our initiative is that these are not minor difficulties to be swept aside in the search for remedies, but serious issues to be studied not as questions of law or policy alone, but as historical, philosophical, or cultural questions, in other words, as questions to be put to the humanities. In our first conference last year, the emphasis was on the cultural factors in the conceptualization and representation of human rights. This year, the focus is on the role and responsibilities of the state. In next year's conference, to which I hereby invite all of you, we'll be talking about questions relating to the species, in other words, to the human in human rights. Now, in general, speakers in this conference will not be given the lavish introductions that they richly deserve. We have a brochure on all of your chairs that you can consult, and if you want to know more than the brochure tells you, you can approach any one of our speakers and ask them to tell you why they are so famous and well-respected, and they will happily oblige. We will, however, make an exception to this general rule for this evening's speakers. Michael Gillespie of Duke University will now do the honors for Michael Ignatieff and his respondent, Jean Elshtain. Michael?